If you're learning guitar and you feel like you're practicing but not actually getting better, there's a good chance that you're skipping one of the most boring, obvious, and annoying tools in all of music, but one that's actually the most important for your success as a beginner, and that's the metronome. And I completely get it. Nobody wants to hear you use a metronome. It sounds like the musical equivalent of eat your vegetables. But after teaching guitar, bass, and drums for the past 4 years now and playing for upwards of 20 years, I've realized something. Most beginners don't hate the metronome because it doesn't work. They hate it because nobody's ever actually really taught them how to use it. My name's Jacob. I've been playing music for the past 20 years now. I've been teaching for about 4, and I've worked with students in all age ranges. And I'd like to share some wisdom with you that I think will help you understand how to use this thing a bit better so that you actually feel like it will help you track your progress instead of just being something that doesn't really make sense that you drown out of the background. So the first thing I want to talk about is mental stack. When you first pick up any instrument, and we'll use guitar for the sake of this video, you have about 15 million other background tasks that are running when you're trying to learn the instrument. So you're thinking about which string you're on, which fret you're on, which fingers you're using, how to hold your pick, how to use your wrist. There's so many different little things that are happening, and that can kind of max out your mental bandwidth. Over time, these things will become more automated in your brain and it won't feel so overloaded. But in the beginning stages, adding a metronome too early can become just another extra task that kind of fries your brain. And that's sort of why a lot of times people will start to tune out the metronome. But the problem with that is if you've tuned out the metronome, it's basically useless at that point. So the main idea here is to shift your thinking from the job of the metronome is not necessarily to give you speed. The job of the metronome is to even out your playing. A lot of beginners think that the metronome is there to just make them faster over time, so they'll turn it on and they'll try to play a riff, immediately fall apart, and then think this just isn't working and I'm just bad at this. But that's not really the point. The metronome is more so used to help show where your playing is uneven. So think of it like ironing a shirt. You're not trying to iron out the parts that are already smooth. You're looking for the wrinkles. The metronome is trying to show you where the wrinkles are at in your playing. So let's use Master of Puppets as an example for this video because Master of Puppets nowadays is such a common beginner riff with the younger generation. I think it has to do with Stranger Things. So I'm going to turn on my metronome real quick. And here's one of the most common things that I'll kind of see in playing when people try to show me Master of Puppets. So they'll sit down and they might do this. So not only did I allow myself to get completely mixed around in that riff, but I also had specific parts of it that I was speeding up on and slowing down on. And the problem with that is you've already missed the point of the metronome. So the first thing that I want to teach you to show you how to overcome this obstacle is something I call routing. So the left hand for most people tends to be a bit more difficult in the starting stages. So before we even worry about the speed, we're just going to take some time to actually map out where our fingers are going for the riff in particular. And I will literally tell students to spend at least like one session just kind of sitting down and working on this. Now this can have the pick with it or not. It kind of depends on what you think is going to be the most helpful, but the main focus in this session should just be thinking about where your fingers are going, what they're doing the whole time. And notice we're not using this with a metronome yet. I'm not even necessarily using this with a signal going through my guitar. But I'm literally thinking to myself, okay, so there's the open string, and then there's first finger, open string, first finger, second finger, open first finger, third finger, so on and so forth. And whatever the riff is, I would slowly walk that path with my hands until they understand where they're going. So at this stage, rhythm just does not matter. Speed doesn't matter. The picking hand doesn't even necessarily matter. You're just teaching your hands the root. And the reason why I'm making such a big deal about it is this is the part that beginners often skip because it's too slow. But the whole point of this routing stage is to lessen the mental burden that is happening in your left hand so that when you go to put it to a metronome, you have one less thing to worry about, right? So you could also do this with the picking hand as well. You could take an entire session just going or picking it however you pick it, right? And just planning out how you're exactly going to do it so that you can, once you put it to the metronome, be focusing purely on the sound of your instrument along that click. Okay, so the second step that we need to do is we have to find a tempo where the whole riff is smooth. Okay, so if I go to play this riff, and it's very uneven and out of time like that, I want to slow myself down until I get to a point where I can actually play evenly. So once you know the root, you're going to bring in the metronome. But the big mistake that I see here oftentimes is people pick a tempo based on the part of the riff they can already play, right? That's not really what the metronome is trying to help us with. It's trying to help us with the part that we suck at, okay? So maybe you can play the first half of Master of Puppets at 80 BPM, but then as soon as that pinky comes in, you start dragging behind really hard. That means 80 BPM is not your tempo. This is very important to understand because if you think about Master of Puppets, 90% of the riff is these 3 fingers. Okay, so when I bring in the pinky finger, all of a sudden I slow down. That's going to give me the sensation, if I slow down to where my pinky can play it, that I should be able to play the riff a lot faster. Okay, because you can play 90% of it faster. But again, the point of the metronome right now is not to actually even out your playing. It's to show you where the wrinkles are at. So if one part of the riff keeps slowing down, that is essentially your baseline, right? Like that is your weakest link, and that's what you need to go to until you can play that whole thing thoroughly with the click. So again, our basic example being, right, we play Master of Puppets, 90% of it's great, and then we slow down on that one little part. That is not a speed issue yet. That is a coordination issue. And honestly, in the beginning stages of guitar, 90% of your issues are going to be coordination issues. So while I understand the desire to want to go fast and to be able to like blaze through things and see that improvement, you're not going to see that if you're not taking the time to work out the coordination. So most of the time, like when a beginner says like, I just can't seem to get myself to play it fast enough, what it really means is my brain isn't talking to my fingers fast enough, right? That goes back to that mental stack thing. That is proof that you have too much mental bandwidth that is occupying your fingers. And that means that you need to be taking the time to actually work that out to where it's not taking up so much bandwidth. Now, this is not like an exact thing for everyone. It's going to be different for everybody. But the reason why slowing down works is because you're not just like practicing slow for the sake of being slow. You're giving your brain enough time to coordinate the movement properly. And the really cool thing about that is once it clicks, a lot of times in my case with my students, they'll see a very quick jump in their ability to play something, because it's typically one of those things where it's like in the example of Master of Puppets, you get the pinky doing what it wants to do and all of a sudden it can catch up to the rest of your fingers, and now you can actually play the whole riff at that original speed that you wanted to. So we have like a very simple 3-step process that we've been walking through so far. Step 1 being to route out those fingers. Step 2 to be to get it to a click. Like I said, not a fast click, a click, right? The speed doesn't matter. What matters is we find a speed that we can play it slowly. So if we're able to do those first 2 things, then the third thing that we're going to do from there is just iteratively improve and gradually increase the tempo. This is the part that's actually really simple if you've done the first 2 parts in earnest, and if you've actually managed to work them out properly. Because basically what's happened now is you've gotten your mental stack to a point to where it can handle playing a riff and listening to a click at the same time. So from there, it's literally just a matter of going up piece by piece, right? So I always tell my students, when you go to the gym and you're lifting, you're not going to see muscle growth as fast as the numbers go up. But you can track that progress through tracking the numbers. This is exactly what the metronome is doing. So once you've worked out your first 2 steps, you might play Master of Puppets at 50 beats per minute, but by the end of the week, you might be able to play it at 55. Once that feels controlled, you might see big jumps, like exponential curve kind of thing, where the week after that, you can go up to 65 and then 80 and then 100 and so on and so forth. So you don't need to practice the same riff for 2 hours straight. For most people, 5 to 10 focused minutes with the metronome is way better than 30 minutes of just kind of like having the metronome on and guessing and getting frustrated. So the big takeaway that I want you to have from here is that us having like a system where we like set the table, so to speak, and get our hands used to what they have to do before we introduce another element to that mental stack is going to drastically improve your ability to be able to take on that next aspect, that next that next layer in the mental stack. So I can promise you this will not be the most enjoyable thing ever, but that's because it's going to be a new habit, okay? And if you're able to consistently work this into your practice, whether it's like 5 to 10 minutes at a time or more, you're going to very quickly see yourself start to actually improve, and that part I can promise you. So I want to wrap this all up again with that really quick 3-step framework. Step 1, you have to map out your fingers. You have to learn the route that your fingers are taking. The picking hand depends on the song, right? If it's like some complicated picking and it's necessary, then yes, route out your picking hand as well. Step 2, bring the metronome in, but bring it at a tempo to where you can play things evenly, not just play the easiest part and then slow down. Step 3, slowly increase your tempo and then track your progress over time. And that's basically it. That's the most open secret in music. It's not really flashy or exciting or magical, some kind of shortcut, but it works because it turns practice from guessing into something that you can actually measure. So my final note with this is our goal here is not to be a robot. The goal is to give yourself enough structure so you can actually feel yourself getting better. Because once you start seeing that progress, it can get a lot more fun and addictive to see that improvement. So try to befriend the metronome. Eat your musical vegetables. Not the whole bag of broccoli, but just a serving at a time. And then make sure you're also spending time to play things that you enjoy. So I tell my students a lot of the times, like, if I say, hey, we're going to work on this riff for the next week or so, I'm not expecting you to go home and just play it constantly over and over and over again. I'm expecting you to dedicate some time to that in a productive manner, but then the rest of the time that you spend on the guitar is up to you. And I encourage you to find different things that you play. The other caveat I want to put with that is the level that you want to achieve in any riff that you're learning in the beginning stage is completely up to you. This requires some proper judgment, but for example, if you really love Metallica, then it probably makes sense that you're going to spend a lot more time working on Master of Puppets than you would like Smells Like Teen Spirit or Smoke on the Water. And that's completely okay too, because the goal here is to kind of strike a balance between learning productive practice habits that actually help us move the needle, as well as also just being able to give our time to enjoy the instrument, right? You don't want to turn this into like a chore because you're just going to give up on it then. We want this to be fun, but a big point that I'm getting at here is if we understand how to use the metronome properly, we can both have productive practice time and derive enjoyment from seeing ourselves actually improve instead of feeling like we're just hitting a brick wall all the time. So that's basically all I've got for you guys in this video. Not really my normal style of content, but I figured since I've been teaching for a long time, I'd want to kind of share some wisdom that I've picked up from working with so many different beginners. If you guys have any questions about this or a specific riff or song, drop it in the comments. Like I said, I teach guitar, bass, and drums. I'm always happy to help in any way that I can. And if you guys like seeing this kind of content, let me know. I'm more than happy to kind of keep doing this stuff as long as people are getting value out of it. So until then, peace out, happy playing, and enjoy the progress, guys.